Hello everyone, my name is Dan with This Week in My Podcast, bringing you the new season of Being Proud, our series about interviewing LGBT plus people throughout the worlds of wrestling and online media. Today we are joined by Sazzy Boatright, who we are so thankful for joining us. So let's absolutely go ahead and get started.
Awesome.
Just a quick little bit of information for anyone that might not know you. Do you want to do a little quick introduction for yourself?
Sure. My name is Sazzy Boatright. I am based out of Brooklyn, New York, originally from the Midwest, and I am an independent wrestler in the Northeast here in America.
So starting off with our first question, kind of with how everything has been over the last couple of years, we'll say.
Yeah. To say the very least.
Yes. What have been the big changes for you making your start in the wrestling scene?
Oh gosh. Well, I really didn't start pursuing wrestling until after the pandemic started. At the beginning of 2021, I started training regularly. I kind of dabbled in it before, like in 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
But I wasn't very serious about it. I think that I don't really have a frame of reference for how it was before, but it certainly was a challenge, to come up with ways to train while also, maintaining COVID protocols and stuff. So that was interesting. And it's interesting to like have made my debut in a pandemic and not really know how the wrestling world like worked before then. So, like my debut was outside, which I think is kind of weird now. And we were wrestling in masks for the longest time, which sounds like we were a bunch of luchadors, but we were actually just
not the
masks.
Not the exciting kind of masks.
Right.
No, I think as a point to start in, it's got to have been a massive challenge, really, especially for the stuff like just getting bookings and experience in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was definitely, once it kind of took off, it was a bit of a whirlwind because people were really in a hurry to like get their stuff up.
Yeah.
And really in a hurry to kind of get the indie scene back to where it was. And so when I was in like my 4th month of training, I got some promo pictures done. I cut my first promo and I posted that stuff on Twitter, and I was sort of off to the races then. So it was a little bit like, it was a lot more than I expected right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I'm catching up to it personally and professionally. Like my Twitter was like light years ahead of where I felt like I was experiencing a little bit of imposter syndrome just because of the pace at which everything was moving there for a second was like, it felt breakneck,
Yeah.
But overall, like it's been kind of like a really cool, exciting time because there's been a lot of support along the way. I mean, I'm lucky to be part of a wrestling academy that is extremely supportive and safe. It touts itself as a safe space. It very much is. And it's very queer, most of the people who go there are. And so it's been a really overall positive experience in spite of like the circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's the thing you touched on there about the training being so supportive, being a really massive thing, obviously at any point in time, but especially a time like this as well. And, almost feeling kind of thrust into a spotlight with how everything was. Everyone was wanting to get back in, everyone was wanting bookings, everyone was wanting to just get going again. That to be, say 4 months in and have people running after you must have been a very surreal experience.
It was something. It was, yeah. I mean, I've been an actor for a long time. I've been represented by agencies and sent out for like screen acting work for like the better part of 10 years. So it kind of was like, it felt like something that I had been prepared for a long time, but also, it's an entire, I mean, wrestling is not, it's not the acting world per se. There are a lot of parallels, but the businesses are slightly different and the demands are slightly different.
Yeah.
Needless to say. But yeah, it's sort of like overnight successes are 10 years in the making kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what it felt like.
I think that leads us quite nicely into the next section as well. It was touching on your time in acting. Have you felt like there's much crossover between that and your wrestling?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that wrestling like screen acting and like the entertainment business at large, there are types. You're a type of wrestler. There's a demand for a type in certain ways and not in certain ways. So like while I like my acting type might be seen in like, I mean, I've been called in for computer hacker girl. I've been called in for like drug addict girl, thief girl, I'm covered in tattoos. I've gone out for every lesbian role that has come across any castings plate in New York City. And I'm not going out for the ingenue, obviously. Like I'm not going out for young impressionable girl or love interest, like heterosexual love interest most of the time. I actually did once and I was like, this feels clunky, but whatever.
It doesn't quite fit right.
I mean, I can do it, but am I the person? Probably not. So I mean, in the same way, like I'm a wrestler that's very like I'm very gimmick heavy. I'm very gaga, like I'm proficient as a wrestler, but I'm not like going to be seen in Bloodsport. I'm not going to be in like the puro, like Japanese style shows or whatever, I'm not some sort of crazy technician. So, in that same way, it's like kind of figuring out what niches I fit into and where, not necessarily where I don't fit into, but just where I will be better serving myself and others as a wrestler.
Yeah, like where your skill set works best for you.
Exactly. And it's always been the same in acting, like it's always been, what does this particular acting roster need? Like in looking for an agent and stuff, it's like, are there people in this agency who already look like me, already go out for the same kind of parts as me, and like a wrestling roster, like you don't want too many of a certain type. So I think that's been a gift and a curse in both wrestling and in acting. But I mean, it's only a curse when I'm not embracing like my place, and like my type. So it's been mostly good.
There is only really like so many people that can fit into one space. As people know, with the American independent scene right now, there is a lot of competition out there.
Oh my God, it's crazy. It's crazy. And like people come from all kinds of different backgrounds, you know, like your training, it doesn't necessarily weigh in as much as who you
Yeah.
know, and that applies for acting and that applies for wrestling as well.
Yeah.
Um, helps to be independently wealthy in either one
Yes.
because having a job gets in the way of doing them.
Hmm.
So, you know, but that's a whole other that's a
Yeah.
whole other can of worms.
Well, it was going to be a thing I wanted to touch on because I wanted to ask
Sure.
how similar do you find the kind of environments that you were in acting compared to wrestling? Like, I know
Mhm.
obviously acting doesn't have a per se kind of term like backroom culture as much. I
Mhm.
wouldn't think so compared to wrestling.
It depends, you know, like I think on every TV set there are people who are there for the first time and very like taken with the whole thing, and maybe, you know, they're kind of marks for
Yep.
who is working on set. And then there are people who have done a little bit of work, aren't so marky, and you know, maybe know how like a little bit more of that on camera etiquette, or
Yeah.
on set etiquette, I should say. And then there are the people who are like the heavy hitters, and you know, the series regulars and the TV stars and whatnot. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I worked on Law and Order, I had somebody, I worked with two series regulars, Peter Scanavino and Ice T. Ice T is who everybody always asks me about. That guy sat in the corner on Twitter the entire time. He did not talk to me. He didn't want anything to do with me. And that's totally fine, you
Yep.
know. But if that was my first TV job, I think that I would be like scarred by that. You know what I mean?
Probably.
Um, alternately, like I worked on Blue Bloods with Donnie Wahlberg, who is an absolute sweetheart, goes out of his way to like talk to everybody and make everybody feel seen and part of the cast. And um you know, that's just another, I mean, and we meet wrestlers like that who shake everybody's hand and they still help with the ring even though they don't have to, and
Hmm.
stuff like that, you know. And both of them can exist in the same space, and you know, the machine continues to move.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, so it's very much like, I mean, I've been in locker rooms like that with people from AEW who really just, you know, they're doing their thing. They are in the back of the locker room, they're calling matches, they're prepping, they're not socializing. And then there are
Yeah.
people who are younger and more new like myself, and we have like our little bubble in the locker room where we might be joking around more or talking more or whatever it is, you know.
Mhm.
Everybody's got their own process. And I think uh having been a working actor has made me appreciate like that locker room dynamic a little bit more too.
Yeah. So moving back over to the wrestling, one of the things that's been fantastic for myself and obviously many other people has been the absolutely massive rise of independent queer wrestling across the US and the
Mm-hmm.
UK and really across the world. What I really want to ask about is, do you think in that time that you've been wrestling that it has helped you maybe with expression or in regards to a different way of seeing your identity?
Yeah, I do. I really agree with that. Like I came out not that long before I started wrestling. Um, I probably came out about 6 months prior. And for about 5 years prior to that, like I had been going out for all of these queer roles all the time. And so it was like a classic case of everybody else seeing it except for me.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, met a woman, fell in love, and thus kind of like started to embrace that part of me and really start to embrace it. And wrestling, as a wrestler, it has allowed me to be a heightened version of myself. And that means a heightened version of my queer self. So, you know, I think that a big part of it for me is like being a woman in a man's realm, and namely a heterosexual man's realm. And a lot of like the ways that I've cut promos and talked to, like, interacted with other wrestlers has been by and large by like me asking myself, like, what as a queer woman can I do to hold my own in this space full of hetero men, you know, it's cis het men, really, you know, for the most part. And I think that's where, is this a family friendly podcast, or can I talk about my MFing?
No, you can absolutely go ahead with that.
Okay, cool. Because that's where that came from. Like, I you know, we cut promos on each other at my wrestling academy every once in a while, and somebody who was a straight white man cut a promo on me and my queerness. And so you know, I asked myself, like, what is the weirdest flex that I can think of as a woman to, like, this straight man?
What is the most uncomfortable threat that you can give to someone?
Right. And it's stealing his girl and fucking his mom, you know, like.
I mean, look, I don't think you're wrong with that. I don't think it's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad I did it because it was somewhat humorous, but I also was like, you know, this is just, it's gonna be, I could talk about how I'm gonna beat up a guy until I'm blue in the face, but nobody's gonna pay attention to me until I flex like a man does, you know. Yeah. And that's what that ended up looking like, was me threatening to fuck their moms. So, you know, that's how
Genius comes in many forms.
Fair. Yeah, so that is that's the long answer to that question, I think. But yes, I think my queerness has very much informed and been a huge part of, like, me coming into myself as a wrestler.
No, amazing. So then, kind of to take a bit of opinion for now, what about wrestling do you think resonates, I think, so much with queer people?
Oh gosh, I think it's like the pageantry of it. I think it's the identity. I think you could argue that there's a little bit of like identity politics that kind of come into play, with gimmicks and like in-ring dynamic and stuff. And it's a very physical, you know, it's this very physical form that really, as a wrestler, you have to really embrace your physicality and your body and its ability. And there's no way around it, you know. I think it's just like, if you are, for example, like, I mean, if you are a very masculine female or trans masculine, trans feminine, you know, like, there's no there's just, you are all of that, you know. It's all out there on display. And I think it has a lot of, I mean, I know that it has a lot of crossover with ballroom culture, because Billy Dixon has even pointed to it by producing Paris's Bumping, you know.
Absolutely.
And now doing the second iteration of that in June, which I will be a part of. And the Cassandra Cup as well, like paying homage to a trans wrestler or a queer wrestler. And I think that there's something that makes queer people feel very at home in this sort of environment. Maybe it's like just maybe it's just like the costumes, or just
Yeah.
like taking on something like a character. I don't know, for myself, like that's what it is. I would assume that that's kind of the case for others as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's just I think it's always been so gay.
Yeah. Oh, we will shout from the rooftops about how gay wrestling is. It is.
Oh yeah.
It's not being stopped. It's always an interesting question for us to ask. We have lots of people talk about kind of the theatrical nature of wrestling, even through to people talking about wrestling as like an extended form of drag performance.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree.
So it has always been an interesting thing to kind of have a take on and think about those different bits about how, like, in many ways it is this kind of hyper masculine being that
Right.
that underlies a performance show that like stretches through like ballet and gymnastics.
Right. And then like it keeps coming up for me on I keep bringing it up. It's not coming up for me. I keep bringing up the Rhea Ripley thing because I have a huge crush on Rhea Ripley, but I also like
I'm
like
holding my hands up.
I see a lot of myself in Rhea Ripley because she's a very masculine woman. And I was that for so many years before I finally came out. So I think I'm projecting a lot. But there is something to be said for her pinning women and like looking very proud and happy about it in this like Vince McMahon, like the sexual and homoerotic aspect of that is not lost on Vince McMahon. It can't be.
Yeah, I always just think if you're able to ignore, I was gonna say undertones, they're not undertones. If you're able to ignore like all those bits that say like, hey, maybe this thing might be gay, you need to be like thinking on a different level, surely, right?
Right.
Like, I don't think I'm being ridiculous.
No, I mean, even Effie has started a whole nonprofit called Wrestling is Gay. So, like, I mean, come on.
And we see the amount of people turning up at GCW every single year for Effie.
Exactly. For Effie, for Chic, for Bussy, for Alley Catch, all of these like queer icons. Yeah.
And then maybe going over towards the independent world specifically, for myself, it has a lot of those kinds of, I guess I would say punk feelings about it. By and for the people it's being made by.
Yeah.
And so you see like things like, for example, the absolute explosion that has been like Polyam Woodstock and Polyam Party and all of that, which has been so incredible to see, just adding to the width of this amazing queer wrestling scene that we're seeing now.
Yeah, that is absolutely, I mean, my official debut was at a secret, like kind of like half punk show, half wrestling show.
Yeah.
And then my more public in-ring debut was at Polyam Woodstock. And like, that's very much been like the foundation of my experience in the independent scene.
Yeah.
And I think that it is where I am by virtue of trying to stick it to the man a little bit.
Yeah.
Or like get around the athletic commission's like extremely strict guidelines and expensive guidelines. So that's really been kind of like a byproduct of that. but I think that it's also just like an aesthetic that's really kind of dictating the whole indie wrestling scene right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think because at least where I am, like New York, wrestling in New York State has all but completely disappeared. But I've done like a handful of these like underground indie shows between New York City and like Rochester, New York, and elsewhere that are like word of mouth only, and they're in like abandoned malls, or they're in like clubs, basic like nightclubs and stuff like that. And I think it's like, I'm hoping that it is ushering in a new era of wrestling for the East Coast, but New York in particular, because God, we really need it, you know? I mean, we can go to New Jersey, whatever, but it's not as interesting, you know? Like, it's just not.
I mean, it's the thing of like having your own space and not having to feel like you're invading on someone else.
Yeah, like, or just doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, because that is, I mean, there are like 2 or 3 like Knights of Columbus halls, or like, you know, venues that are like rented for luncheons and church and stuff like that, and like we're inhabiting those spaces, which is so traditional, you know, and like such a staple of the indie scene unto itself. But it's also like, I feel like with the internet and everything, with IWTV and streaming and Twitch and all that, there's so much more that we can do.
Absolutely.
And such a wider audience that we can get as well. So that's my plug for punk rock indie wrestling, underground wrestling. Give Industrial World Wrestling a follow if
absolutely do.
you're listening to this.
We'll link them down below somewhere.
Hell yeah, great. Cool. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
I think it does. Okay. I'm gonna take it.
Okay, cool.
So then just going on to our last question. What would your words be for any young queer people looking to get into wrestling?
Oh, geez, like, do it. Just do it. You know, like, take the jump. You will land somewhere. And it will, if you are true to yourself, it's gonna be okay. I mean, I really I didn't know what I was getting into, but I had a very strong feeling about doing this at this particular point in my life. And I think that if that's how a young queer person feels about where they're at in their life, and like they have this inexplicable urge to become a pro wrestler, then they gotta follow it, and they've got to follow it with all of the commitment they can possibly muster. You really can't, like, I tried it, you really can't like have one foot in. I mean, you can't dabble in wrestling, you know, like, because when you dabble in wrestling, you go in like twice a month and you're like, ouch, my whole body hurts because I've been hitting a mat like so many times, and then you don't go more because you're like not callousing yourself to that situation. So you know, I think that now more than ever is a great time to be a young queer person in wrestling, because there's so much support, and there's so many people who are looking for the same things, you know, and looking for their people. And I think it's a good place to find them personally.
Absolutely. Well, it has been an absolute joy having you on. If you want to take any last moments to do any last minute plugs, then by all means go ahead. Now is your time.
Jeez. Well, I'm on all social media, Sazzy Boatright. And I have some shows coming up, but you're in the UK, right? So I don't have any UK shows coming up yet, but I think that Paris is bumping, and I have, if you follow Industrial World Wrestling, a lot of our shows end up streaming, and we're doing shows like about once a month at this point. So give IWW a follow, give Paris is Bumping and Vibe Wrestling a follow.
Yep.
That's all I can think of. Follow me.
All of those will be linked, so
Great. Cool.
There we go. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been Dan. This has been
me.
Thank you.
Sazzy.
Thank you so much for listening and watching. Goodbye.